By the late 1890s, the United States had stretched all the way from the Atlantic to the Pacific, but the government had its eyes on a larger strategic goal, pushing European colonial powers out of the Western Hemisphere entirely to secure total regional dominance. Just 90 miles south of Florida, an opportunity was brewing. The island of Cuba was locked in a brutal war for independence, with revolutionaries fighting desperately to break free from centuries of control by the Spanish Empire. Under the guise of a peaceful mission, the U.S. government dispatched a massive battleship. The USS Maine was anchored directly in Havana Harbor. Then, on the night of February 15, 1898, a massive detonation ripped through the ship's hull. The vessel sank quickly, killing 268 members of the American crew. Investigators found only twisted metal and dark wreckage protruding from the water. To this day, the cause of the explosion remains a historical mystery. The American government now possessed a highly visible, visceral tragedy. This event provided the perfect moral framing to transition from diplomatic tension into an active military pursuit of justice. American newspapers completely bypassed the lack of evidence. Publishers plastered sensational headlines and graphic illustrations across their front pages, explicitly blaming Spain for the explosion. Pro-war propagandists seized the moment, creating a furious rallying cry that immediately swept across the nation: "Remember the Maine." Riding this wave of public outrage, President William McKinley issued an ultimatum. He officially demanded that Spain withdraw all its armed forces from Cuba. Spain refused and severed diplomatic relations. McKinley launched a swift naval blockade and called up 125,000 military volunteers. The Spanish-American War was officially on. While the American public rallied around the cause of Cuban liberation, the military's opening maneuvers would soon reveal the global reach of the administration's objectives. The United States military pushed far beyond the Caribbean. They aggressively targeted the entire Spanish Empire at once. While Cuba was practically on America's doorstep, the U.S. simultaneously deployed forces to the other side of the world, targeting the Spanish colony of the Philippines. Over in the Pacific, U.S. Commodore George Dewey sailed a naval squadron into Manila Bay. Utilizing overwhelming logistical and technological advantages, Dewey obliterated the Spanish fleet in exactly 2 hours. The data from the battle is absurdly lopsided. The Spanish lost almost 400 men, while the Americans lost fewer than 10. The victory was so effortless that Commodore Dewey actually caused the battle in the middle to order his crew a second breakfast. But fighting a massive naval war on the opposite side of the planet creates a severe logistical problem. The U.S. Navy desperately needed a mid-Pacific supply lifeline to sustain its operations. To solve this, the United States opportunistically annexed the independent nation of Hawaii right in the middle of the conflict. They absorbed the existing infrastructure to establish a permanent strategic naval base for the Asian theater. Meanwhile, back in the Caribbean, the strategy looked very different. Unlike the pure naval domination in the Pacific, conquering Cuba required a grueling combined arms approach. The American Army, featuring a young Theodore Roosevelt and his volunteer cavalry known as the Rough Riders, stormed San Juan Hill in a grinding land battle. This flushed the Spanish forces out of Santiago, allowing the U.S. Navy to sink the remaining Spanish ships in the harbor. By pairing a grinding land siege in the Caribbean with absolute naval dominance in the Pacific, the United States rapidly converted a localized regional dispute into a coordinated, multi-continent land grab. The combined assault was brutally efficient. A ceasefire was signed by August, just a few months after the conflict began, prompting future Secretary of State John Hay to dub it a splendid little war. This handwritten document is the 1898 Treaty of Paris. It legally formalizes the spoils of American victory, starting with Spain relinquishing Cuba. But Article 8 outlines explicit expansion, handing control of Puerto Rico and Guam to the U.S., and forcing Spain to sell the Philippines. The civilian populations in these territories soon realized their political status remained unchanged. Authority over their daily lives had simply been transferred from the Spanish crown to the United States government. This realization triggered an immediate massive backlash. By 1899, locals in the Philippines rose up against the U.S. occupation, and the Philippine-American War erupted. The ensuing 3-year campaign to suppress the Filipino resistance was devastating. Ultimately, 10 times more U.S. troops died trying to crush the independence movement than had died fighting the entire Spanish Empire. A military campaign allegedly launched to end European colonial oppression concluded with the United States violently suppressing the independence of millions of people. By the end of the conflict, the U.S. government had proven its ability to take a sudden domestic tragedy and successfully manipulate it into a vast campaign of foreign conquest. The mystery of the USS Maine ultimately provided the perfect moral pretext. It was the geopolitical spark that allowed the United States to forcibly redraw the map of the world and launch a global empire.